The medical ward on Kesher 7 had never been designed for this many patients. Valarians lay on every available surface, their pale blue skin covered in dark purple lesions that marked the progression of the plague. Administrator Kelvin walked through the corridors with a heavy heart, watching his people suffer and die. The doctors had tried everything they knew, but nothing worked. The infection spread faster than they could treat it, and their medicine seemed useless against this unknown disease. Kelvin was a tall Valarian, thin like all his species, with long, delicate fingers that trembled as he reviewed the latest casualty reports. 3,000 dead in the last week alone. The entire colony numbered only 50,000 souls, and at this rate, they would all be gone within a month. He had sent distress calls to the Galactic Council 5 days ago, begging for medical assistance. But the council moved slowly. They needed committees and approvals and diplomatic protocols before they could send help. His people did not have time for protocols. The communications officer found him in the main hospital wing. She was young, barely out of training, and her face showed the same exhaustion everyone wore these days. "Administrator, we have received a response to our distress call," she said quietly. Kelvin felt a surge of hope. "The council is sending medical frigates?" The officer hesitated. "No, sir. The response came from human vessels. 3 ships are changing course to reach us. They say they will arrive in 2 days. Humans?" Kelvin had heard of them. The newest species to join the galactic community, barely a decade ago. They came from a world called Earth. Far out on the rim, the reports about them were strange and sometimes contradictory. Some species spoke of human curiosity and kindness. Others whispered warnings about human unpredictability and violence. "What kind of ships are they sending?" One. The communications officer checked her data pad. "Military vessels, sir. Warships. 1 heavy cruiser called the Valiant, and 2 destroyers, the Defiance and the Liberty." The hope in Kelvin's chest turned cold. "Warships? We asked for medical aid, not soldiers. Why would they send warships to a plague zone?" Nobody had an answer to that question. 2 days later, Kelvin stood in the command center, watching the sensor displays with growing anxiety. The 3 human ships had just dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system. The sensors showed their true size now, and Kelvin felt his breath catch. These were not small vessels. The Valiant measured over 800 meters long, bristling with weapons arrays and launch bays. The 2 destroyers were smaller, but still heavily armed, designed clearly for combat rather than mercy. "Open a communication channel," Kelvin ordered. His hands shook as he prepared to speak. What did these humans want? Had they misunderstood the distress call? Or worse, did they see a weakened colony as an easy target? The view screen activated, showing a human male in a dark uniform. He had short brown hair and calm blue eyes that studied Kelvin with an intensity that made the administrator uncomfortable. "This is Commander Jake Morrison of the human vessel Valiant. We received your distress call and have come to render assistance." Kelvin struggled to keep his voice steady. "Commander Morrison, we appreciate your response, but there seems to be a misunderstanding. We requested medical aid. You have brought warships." Morrison nodded slowly. "I understand your confusion, Administrator. We were the closest vessels capable of responding to your emergency. While we are military ships, we carry full medical facilities and trained personnel. We can help your people. But you are soldiers, not healers," Kelvin protested. "Our people are dying from a plague, not fighting a war." Something shifted in Morrison's expression. His voice remained calm, but Kelvin detected a hint of steel beneath the politeness. "Administrator, my chief medical officer has reviewed the data you transmitted. We have doctors, nurses, medical equipment, and experience handling infectious diseases in difficult conditions. We came here to save lives. Will you let us help, or would you prefer to wait for the Council's response?" Kelvin looked at the casualty reports on his own screen. Another 200 dead overnight. The council had still not confirmed when they might send assistance. He closed his eyes and made a decision that terrified him. "Very well, Commander. You may proceed." Morrison's face softened slightly. "Thank you, Administrator. We will begin transport operations within the hour. My medical teams will coordinate with your staff to establish treatment protocols. I am also sending my executive officer, Lieutenant Commander Chris Bailey, to work with you directly on the ground." The channel closed, and Kelvin slumped in his chair. Around him, his staff exchanged worried glances. They had invited armed humans onto their world. There was no going back now. The first human shuttle touched down in the colony's central square 3 hours later. Valarians gathered at a distance, watching with a mixture of hope and fear. The shuttle's ramp descended, and humans emerged carrying cases of equipment. They wore tactical gear that looked like combat armor, and many carried weapons alongside their medical supplies. To the Valarians, who had never known war, the sight was shocking. Lieutenant Commander Chris Bailey was the first to approach Kelvin. He was a shorter human with red hair and friendly green eyes, but even he wore armor and had a sidearm strapped to his leg. He extended his hand in the human gesture of greeting. "Administrator Kelvin. I'm Chris Bailey. We are here to help." Kelvin carefully took the human's hand, surprised by the firm grip. "Your people look more prepared for battle than healing." Bailey glanced back at his teams, who were already unpacking equipment with military efficiency. "We learned a long time ago that crisis situations require preparation for anything. We hope we will only need our medical skills, but we train to be ready for any situation." As they walked through the colony, Kelvin noticed how the humans moved. They were alert, constantly scanning their surroundings, communicating through small devices attached to their ears. It was nothing like the gentle, passive demeanor of council medical personnel. These humans approached the plague like soldiers approaching a battlefield. Bailey seemed to sense Kelvin's unease. "I know we must seem strange to you, but I promise, Administrator, we are very good at what we do. By this time tomorrow, you will see the infection rate drop. Within a week, we will have this plague contained." That is not a hope. That is a commitment. Kelvin wanted to believe him, but doubt gnawed at his mind. He had asked for healers and received warriors. As more human shuttles began descending from the ships above, each carrying more armed medical personnel, Kelvin wondered if he had made a terrible mistake. The Valarians were a peaceful people who had never known conflict. Now they were surrounded by humans who seemed to carry violence and compassion in equal measure. Only time would tell if humanity's help would save them or doom them to something worse than the plague. The main hospital ward had become a scene of controlled chaos. Human medical personnel moved through the corridors with purpose, setting up equipment that looked nothing like Valarian medical technology. Dr. Amy Parker stood in the center of the largest treatment room, directing her teams with sharp, clear commands. She was a tall woman with dark hair pulled back in a tight braid, and her brown eyes missed nothing as she assessed the situation. "I need portable isolation units in rooms 3 through 7, she called out to a young medic. "Get the blood analysis equipment running. I want samples from every patient showing symptoms, organized by progression stage." She turned to another team member. "Where are the air filtration units? This entire wing needs to be under negative pressure within the hour." A Valarian doctor named Theron watched the humans work with growing alarm. He approached Amy carefully, his voice soft and uncertain. "Dr. Parker, perhaps we should discuss treatment approaches before you make so many changes to our facility." Amy barely glanced at him as she continued checking equipment. "No time for lengthy discussions, Dr. Theron. Every minute we delay, more people get infected. We need to establish quarantine protocols immediately." She pulled out a handheld scanner and began taking readings of the air quality. "Your ventilation system is spreading the pathogen throughout the building. That stops now." Theron's face flushed a darker shade of blue. "But we cannot simply shut down our systems. Our patients need proper air circulation. They need to stop breathing in active virus particles," Amy countered. She finally stopped moving and faced him directly. "Look, I understand this is your facility, and these are your patients. But Commander Morrison brought us here to stop a plague, and that is exactly what I intend to do. You can either help us or stay out of the way. But this infection is spreading because your protocols are inadequate for this kind of pathogen. The Valerian doctor stepped back as if he had been struck. In his culture, such direct confrontation was considered extremely rude. He had expected humans to be diplomatic, to work within established Valerian procedures. Instead, they were overturning everything without asking permission. Chris Bailey witnessed the exchange and stepped in quickly. Dr. Theron, I apologize if we seem abrupt. Our methods are different from what you are used to. But Dr. Parker has handled dozens of outbreak scenarios. She knows what works. He gestured toward the treatment rooms. Give us 24 hours. If you do not see improvement, we will reconsider our approach. Theron wanted to protest further, but another alarm sounded from one of the patient rooms. A Valerian child was going into respiratory failure. Before Theron could move, a human medic was already there, administering oxygen and checking vital signs with practiced speed. The child stabilized within minutes, and the medic moved on to the next patient without pause. 24 hours, Theron agreed quietly, though his concern did not fade. Up in orbit, Commander Morrison stood on the bridge of the Valiant, reviewing reports from the surface teams. His tactical officer, a young man named Ryan Hoffman, approached with a worried expression. Sir, we have a situation developing. The Valerian government has started receiving complaints from citizens about our presence. They say, our people are too aggressive, too militaristic. Morrison sighed. He had expected this. What specifically are they complaining about? 1. The weapons, sir. Our medical teams are carrying sidearms, as per standard protocol. The Valerians have never seen armed medical personnel. It frightens them. Hoffman pulled up images on the main display showing human medics in tactical gear treating Valerian patients. They also do not understand why we conduct security sweeps of the treatment areas, because we do not yet know if this plague is natural or artificial, Morrison replied. Until we know for certain, we maintain defensive protocols. He studied the images, understanding the Valerian perspective. To a species that had never known war, his people must seem like invaders rather than helpers. Contact Lieutenant Commander Bailey. Tell him to have our people store their weapons when working directly with patients. They can keep them nearby, but out of sight. We need to build trust. What about the security sweeps, sir? Morrison considered this carefully. Those continue, but do them during shift changes, when fewer Valerians are present. Make them less visible, but do not stop them. Down on the surface, a young Valerian woman named Sarath sat in a hospital bed, watching a human nurse named Kyle Grant work on the patient in the next bed. Kyle was a stocky man with broad shoulders and hands that looked too large for delicate medical work. Yet Sarath had watched him spend the last hour carefully treating an elderly Valerian with a gentleness that contradicted his intimidating appearance. Kyle noticed her watching and offered a small smile. How are you feeling? Sarath hesitated before answering. Her people were naturally cautious, slow to trust strangers. The fever is lower than yesterday. The pain in my chest is less severe. Good. Kyle made notes on his electronic pad. We started you on antivirals last night. They seem to be working. You should continue improving over the next few days. Why do you carry a weapon? Sarath asked suddenly, surprising herself with her boldness. She had seen the gun on Kyle's belt before he removed it and stored it in a locker by the door. Kyle paused in his work. He seemed to consider his answer carefully. Because the universe can be dangerous, and sometimes people who help others become targets. We hope we never need them, but we prepare for the worst while working for the best. But you are a healer. Violence should be against your nature. Healing is my primary purpose, Kyle agreed. But protecting the vulnerable is also part of that purpose. If someone tried to hurt you or another patient, I would stop them. The weapon is just a tool, like my medical scanner. What matters is why and how you use it. Sareth considered this. The concept was foreign to Valerian thinking, but she was beginning to understand the human perspective. On my world, we believe that violence is never acceptable under any circumstances. Kyle sat down on the edge of her bed, his expression thoughtful. That is a beautiful philosophy. I hope you never have to compromise it. But humanity learned through hard experience that sometimes the only way to protect innocent life is to be strong enough to deter those who would harm the innocent. We did not come here to fight. We came to heal. But we are ready to protect you if necessary. Before Sareth could respond, alarms blared throughout the facility. Kyle was on his feet instantly, checking the alert on his communicator. Sareth, stay in your bed. Do not leave this room. He grabbed his weapon from the locker and ran toward the source of the alarm. Sareth's heart raced. What was happening? She heard shouting in the corridors, the sound of running feet. Through her doorway, she saw human medical personnel transforming from gentle caregivers into alert soldiers in seconds. They moved with weapons ready, securing corridors and protecting patients simultaneously. The emergency turned out to be a false alarm, a malfunctioning sensor that detected a containment breach that had not actually occurred. But Sareth had witnessed something important. She watched how the humans instantly shifted from healing mode to protective mode without hesitation. It was like they were two different species occupying the same bodies. When Kyle returned, slightly out of breath but calm, Sareth looked at him with new understanding. You are always ready to fight. Even when you are healing, we are always ready to do whatever is necessary, Kyle corrected gently. Today that means fighting a plague. Tomorrow it might mean something else. But our goal never changes. We protect life. He checked her vital signs again, his hands steady and professional. Now, let me see how you are responding to treatment. That excitement probably raised your blood pressure. As night fell over Kesher 7, the human medical teams continued their relentless work. They had been operating for 18 hours straight, taking only brief breaks for food and rest. The Valerians watched in amazement as humans pushed themselves to exhaustion and then kept going. This was not the gentle, methodical approach of Council medical personnel. This was something entirely different. In the command center, Kelvin reviewed the preliminary reports. The infection rate had dropped by 15% in just one day. New cases were down by 20%. The numbers did not lie. Whatever the humans were doing, it was working. But the cultural cost troubled him. His people were learning to fear and respect these strange beings who carried weapons and compassion with equal ease. Perhaps, Kelvin whispered to himself, the galaxy is more complicated than we believed. 3 days had passed since the humans arrived, and the transformation was remarkable. The main hospital ward that had been filled with dying Valerians now showed rows of recovering patients. The infection rate had dropped to nearly zero, and the mortality rate had fallen by 70%. Dr. Amy Parker stood in the center of the command medical station, studying data streams on multiple screens simultaneously. Something was wrong. The numbers were too perfect, too organized. Natural plagues did not behave this way. She called over one of her lab technicians, a quiet woman named Lisa Monroe, who specialized in pathogen analysis. Lisa, look at these genetic sequences from the virus samples. What do you see? Lisa studied the data for several minutes, her eyes narrowing. These markers are not natural, Doctor. The protein structures are too symmetrical. This looks like it was designed in a laboratory. Amy felt her stomach tighten. She had suspected this for the past day, but confirmation made it real. Run a full analysis. I need to know exactly what we are dealing with before I report this to Commander Morrison. 2 hours later, Amy stood in Morrison's ready room aboard the Valiant. The commander listened without interruption as she presented her findings. On the display screen between them, complex molecular diagrams showed the evidence. This is not a natural plague, Amy concluded. Someone engineered this bioweapon specifically to target Valarian biology. The incubation period, the transmission method, the lethality rate. All of it was designed to maximize casualties while making it look like a natural outbreak. Morrison's face remained calm, but his eyes had gone cold. Do we know who deployed it? Not yet. But whoever did this knew Valerian physiology very well. This was not a random attack. This was targeted. Amy pulled up another screen. There is something else. Based on the progression model, I estimate this pathogen was released approximately 3 weeks ago. That means whoever did this timed it very carefully. Timed it for what? Morrison asked, though his tactical mind was already forming possibilities. To weaken the colony before a follow-up action. This was an opening move, Commander, not the entire attack. Amy met his gaze directly. We need to increase security. The Valarians are in more danger than they realize. Morrison activated his communication console. Bridge. This is Morrison. Go to alert status yellow. I want long-range sensors, sweeping the system every 30 minutes. If anything enters this system, I want to know immediately. Sir, should we inform Administrator Kelvin? Amy asked. Morrison considered this. Not yet. If we tell him his people were deliberately targeted, it will cause panic. We continue medical operations as if nothing has changed, but we prepare for trouble. He stood and moved to the window, overlooking Keshar 7. How much longer until the plague is completely eliminated? At current rates, another 4 days. We have identified the antiviral combination that works best against this pathogen. Most patients are responding well to treatment. Then we have 4 days to figure out who did this and why, Morrison said quietly. Down on the surface, Kyle Grant had become something of a legend among the Valarians. He worked 16-hour shifts without complaint, treating hundreds of patients with the same careful attention he gave to each individual. Sareth had recovered enough to leave her bed, and she often followed Kyle during his rounds, learning from his methods. Why do you work so hard? She asked him one afternoon. You barely sleep. You barely eat. This cannot be healthy. Kyle smiled tiredly as he checked another patient's vital signs. When I joined the medical corps, I took an oath. I promised to protect life and relieve suffering to the best of my ability. These people need help, and I can provide it. Sleep can wait, but you are just one person. You cannot save everyone. Maybe not, Kyle admitted. But I can save the ones in front of me right now. That has to be enough. He moved to the next bed, where an elderly Valerian male was struggling with respiratory problems. Kyle's hands moved with practiced efficiency, adjusting oxygen levels and administering medication. Sareth watched in fascination. The human worked with an intensity that bordered on obsession. But underneath, she saw genuine compassion. You humans are very strange. You carry weapons but heal with gentleness. Kyle paused and looked at her thoughtfully. Both. Humans are capable of terrible cruelty and amazing compassion. We chose which side to embrace. I chose to be a healer. But that does not erase my ability to fight if necessary. We are complicated, Sareth. Maybe that is what makes us effective. In the security office that the humans had established near the medical facility, Chris Bailey reviewed surveillance data with growing concern. He had noticed something odd in the colony's communication logs from 3 weeks ago. There had been a brief burst of encrypted transmissions sent off-world, lasting only a few seconds. The Valarians had no record of sending it, and their systems should not have been capable of generating that kind of signal. Someone had planted a transmitter in the colony. Bailey contacted Morrison immediately. Sir, I found something. Someone sent a coded message from Keshar 7 about 3 weeks ago. Right around the time Dr. Parker estimates the bioweapon was deployed. Can you trace where the message went? Working on it, but the signal was bounced through several relay points. Whoever sent it knew how to cover their tracks. Bailey pulled up star charts, but based on the initial transmission vector, it was sent toward the outer reaches. That is Krell territory, sir. Morrison felt pieces clicking into place. The Krell were a raiding species. known for attacking weak targets. They were not sophisticated enough to develop bioweapons themselves, but they had connections to those who were. How long would it take a Krell raiding fleet to reach Keshar 7 from their nearest base? Bailey did quick calculations. Approximately 3.5 weeks, sir. And the plague was released 3 weeks ago, Morrison said quietly. They expected the Valerians to be dead, or dying, by the time they arrived, an easy target with no defenders. He activated ship-wide communications. All hands, this is the commander. Go to alert status red. I want combat readiness in 30 minutes. This is not a drill. Aboard the Valiant, the crew moved with practiced efficiency. What had been a medical mission was transforming into a potential combat situation. In the hangar bay, fighter pilots rushed to their craft. In the weapons control room, gunners brought targeting systems online. Throughout the ship, humans prepared for the possibility of battle. Morrison contacted the other 2 human ships. Lisa? Ryan? This is Jake. We have intelligence suggesting a Krell raiding fleet may be inbound to this system. Current estimate puts them about half a day out. Captain Lisa Chen of the Defiance responded first. Her voice was calm but serious. Understood, Commander. What are your orders? Maintain position over Keshar 7. We continue medical operations on the surface, but we prepare to defend this colony if necessary. Captain Ryan Brooks of the Liberty added, Sir, we are outnumbered if an entire Krell fleet shows up. Tactical analysis suggests we would face at least 12 combat vessels. I am aware of the odds, Ryan. But we did not come this far to abandon these people. We hold position, and we protect the colony. Understood? Both captains acknowledged the order. On the surface, the Valerian government remained unaware of the developing situation. Kelvin had just received the latest medical reports and was finally allowing himself to feel hope. The plague was almost defeated. His people would survive. He planned to hold a ceremony thanking the humans for their help. Sarath noticed the change in the humans before anyone else did. Kyle and the other medical personnel continued their work, but there was a new tension in their movements. They checked their communicators more frequently. They spoke in shorter sentences. Something had changed, though they said nothing to the Valerian patients. What is wrong? Sarath asked Kyle directly. Kyle hesitated, then decided honesty was better than deception. We have reason to believe the plague was not natural. Someone may have attacked your world deliberately. We are taking precautions. To this, Sarath felt her blood run cold. Who would do such a thing? We are a peaceful people. We have no enemies. You do now, Kyle said quietly. But do not worry. We are not going to let anything happen to you or your people. That is a promise. As night fell over Keshar 7, the human warships repositioned themselves into defensive formation. Long-range sensors swept the system continuously. In the medical facilities, human personnel continued saving lives while preparing mentally for the possibility that healing time was ending and fighting time was beginning. Dr. Amy Parker administered treatments with steady hands, but her sidearm was back on her belt. Chris Bailey coordinated security sweeps with renewed intensity. Commander Morrison stood on his bridge, watching the sensor displays and waiting for the threat he knew was coming. The Valerians slept peacefully, unaware that the humans who had saved them from plague were now preparing to save them from something far worse. And in the darkness between stars, a Krell raiding fleet drew closer, expecting to find a defenseless world ripe for conquest. They were about to learn that humanity did not abandon those they chose to protect. The alert sounded at 0400 hours ship time. Commander Morrison was already awake, standing on the bridge with a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. He had barely slept in the past day, watching the sensor displays and waiting for the inevitable. Contact, his sensor officer announced. Multiple ships dropping out of faster-than-light travel at the system's edge. Counting 12 vessels, configuration matches Krell Raider class. They are broadcasting approach vectors toward Keshar 7. Morrison set down his coffee cup. Time until they reach orbit? 6 hours at current speed, sir. Sound general quarters. Get me Administrator Kelvin on secure channel. Morrison moved to his command chair, his mind already running through tactical scenarios. 12 Krell ships against his 3 vessels. Not impossible odds, but not favorable, either. Kelvin's face appeared on the view screen moments later. The Valerian administrator looked confused and worried. Commander Morrison, what is happening? My sensors detected multiple ships entering the system. Administrator, I need you to listen carefully, Morrison said, his voice calm but firm. The plague that struck your world was not natural. It was a bioweapon deployed by Krell raiders. They expected your people to be dead or dying by now. Instead, they are finding a defended world. I need you to prepare your people for evacuation. To shelters. Kelvin's face went pale, his skin turning almost white. Krell? But we have no defenses. We have no military. Our constitution forbids violence of any kind. His voice rose in panic. Krell, Commander, you must evacuate as many of us as possible before they arrive. Take our children, our scientists, whoever you can carry. Morrison had expected this response. Administrator, my ships can carry perhaps 5,000 of your people. You have 50,000 colonists. Even if we ran, we could not save everyone. Then save who you can, Kelvin pleaded. We cannot fight. It is not in our nature. Please, Commander, do not let our children die because of our principles. I do not plan to let anyone die, Morrison replied. We are not abandoning Kesher 7. We are going to defend it. Kelvin stared at him in shock. Defend it? Commander, you have 3 ships. They have 12. This is suicide. Your species may value heroic sacrifice, but I cannot ask you to die for us. You are not asking. We are choosing. Morrison leaned forward. Administrator, prepare your shelters and move people underground. We will handle the Krell. The channel closed. Kelvin sat in his office, trembling. Around him, his staff looked to him for guidance, but he had none to give. The humans were going to fight a battle they could not win, sacrificing themselves for a people they had known for less than a week. The concept was incomprehensible to Valerian thinking. On the Valiant, Dr. Amy Parker received orders to evacuate non-essential medical personnel back to the ship. She refused. Commander, I have patients in critical condition. I am not abandoning them because a fight might be coming. Amy, if the Krell make it to the surface, medical personnel will be primary targets, Morrison argued over the communication channel. I need you safe. Then make sure they do not make it to the surface. Amy replied firmly. I am staying with my patients. That is final. Thanks for watching. Ender 3. I'm Stelcian 17. Morrison knew better than to argue further. Understood, Doctor. But arm your staff. If Krell boarding parties reach the surface, I want your people able to defend themselves and their patients. Kyle Grant heard the announcement about the incoming Krell fleet while changing an IV bag for an elderly Valerian patient. His hands never shook, his expression never changed, but Sareth saw something shift in his eyes. She had been helping him with rounds, learning human medical techniques. You are going to fight them, she said quietly. The ship will fight them, Kyle corrected. I will be here, doing my job, but you are a soldier too. I have seen how you move, how you watch everything. You are trained for combat. Kyle finished with the IV and turned to face her. I am a medic first, Sarath. But yes, I have combat training. All human medical personnel do. We learned long ago that healers need to be able to protect themselves and their patients. He checked his sidearm, ensuring it was loaded and ready. I hope I will not need this. But if Krell raiders come through that door trying to hurt my patients, they will discover that human medics are harder to kill than they expect. Chris Bailey organized the remaining security personnel on the surface into defensive positions around the medical facility. He had 43 armed humans against a potential invasion force. Not good odds, but he had worked with worse. A young security officer named Danny Peterson approached him nervously. "Sir, the Valerians are panicking. They want to know what to do." "Tell them to get underground and stay there," Bailey ordered. "Seal the shelters, and do not come out until we give the all-clear signal." He checked his rifle. "And Peterson, remember your training. Krell fight with numbers and aggression, but they are not tactical thinkers. Stay calm, aim carefully, and trust your squad mates." "Yes, sir." Peterson hesitated. "Sir, do you think we can win?" Bailey looked at the young man and saw his own fear reflected back. "I think we are going to try our hardest. That is all anyone can do." In space, the 3 human warships moved into formation. The Valiant took the center position, with the Defiance and Liberty flanking on either side. Morrison opened a channel to his fellow captains. "Lisa, Ryan, you both know the tactical situation. We are outnumbered 4-1. The Krell have more ships, but their vessels are older models with inferior targeting systems. We have better weapons, better shields, and better training." Captain Lisa Chen's voice came back, steady and confident. "We have fought worse odds before, Commander. The Defiance is ready." Captain Ryan Brooks added, "The Liberty stands with you, sir. Let them come." Morrison allowed himself a small smile. This was why he loved serving with humans. They did not run from impossible odds. They faced them head-on. "All ships, hold position and wait for my signal. Let them get close. I want them committed to the attack before we show them what we can do." The Krell fleet approached Keshar 7 with arrogant confidence. Their commander, a brutal veteran named Skaroth, expected to find a dead world or a dying one. Easy pickings for his raiders. Instead, his sensors showed 3 unknown warships in defensive formation. "Identify those vessels," Skaroth ordered his crew. "Configuration unknown, Commander. They are broadcasting as human ships." Skaroth had heard of humans. The galaxy's newest species, barely out of their own system. Primitive and weak. Hail them. Tell them to surrender or be destroyed. The communication went out across all channels. Skaroth's ugly face appeared on view screens throughout the human fleet. He was a massive creature covered in thick scales, with 4 arms and rows of sharp teeth. "Human vessels, you are interfering with Krell salvage operations. Depart immediately, or face the consequences," Morrison responded calmly. "Krell Commander, you are approaching a protected world under human defense. Turn your fleet around and leave this system. This is your only warning." Skaroth laughed, a harsh barking sound. 3 small ships dare to threaten a Krell fleet? You are either very brave or very stupid. I will enjoy taking your ships apart. "You are welcome to try," Morrison replied, and closed the channel. On Keshar 7, Kelvin stood in the colony's command center watching the tactical display. The Krell fleet was spreading out, preparing to surround the human ships. It looked like a predator circling prey. He wanted to look away, but forced himself to watch. These humans were about to die defending his people. The least he could do was witness their sacrifice. Sarath refused to go to the shelters. She stood in the medical facility beside Kyle, helping prepare patients for potential combat situations. "This is insane," she whispered. 3 ships cannot defeat 12. Kyle was checking supplies, organizing emergency medical kits. 3 human ships, he corrected with a slight smile. "That makes a difference. How can you joke at a time like this?" "Because fear does not help anyone," Kyle replied. "We do our job and trust our people in space to do theirs. That is all we can control." An alarm sounded as the Krell fleet entered weapons range. On the Valiant's bridge, Morrison watched the tactical display with focused intensity. The Krell ships were positioning exactly as he had predicted. They were overconfident and predictable. "All ships, weapons free," Morrison commanded. Let us show them why you do not threaten human-protected worlds. The battle was about to begin, and the Krell were about to receive a very expensive education about human warfare. They had expected easy prey. Instead, they had found something the galaxy rarely saw: humans fighting to protect innocence. And humanity had spent its entire existence learning how to fight. The first human missiles launched, streaking across space toward the Krell fleet. In the medical facility, Sareth held her breath. In the command center, Kelvin whispered a prayer to gods he barely believed in. And on 3 human warships, crews who had come to heal, prepared to do violence in defense of those they had sworn to protect. The galaxy was about to learn an important lesson about humanity. They were healers when possible, and warriors when necessary. The first volley of human missiles crossed the distance to the Krell fleet in seconds. The Krell had expected slow, clumsy weapons like those used by most council species. Instead, they faced advanced human ordnance that moved faster and maneuvered more aggressively than anything they had encountered before. 3 Krell ships exploded in the opening seconds of combat, their shields overwhelmed by concentrated fire. The remaining 9 ships scattered in confusion, their neat formation breaking apart. Direct hits on targets 1, 3, and 7. The weapons officer reported aboard the Valiant. All 3 Krell vessels destroyed. Morrison nodded calmly. Continue firing. Target their command ship. I want Scareth to understand. He made a serious mistake today. The Defiance and Liberty moved with perfect coordination, their captains executing maneuvers they had practiced hundreds of times in simulations. They used the planet's gravity well to slingshot around Kesher 7, coming at the Krell fleet from an unexpected angle. More missiles launched, followed by energy weapon fire that lit up the space between the fleets. Aboard Skaroth's flagship, chaos reigned. Return fire, the Krell commander roared. All ships, concentrate on the center vessel. Destroy it. The Krell ships fired their weapons, but their targeting systems were older and slower. The human ships moved like dancers, evading most incoming fire while their shields absorbed the rest. Where Krell tactics relied on overwhelming numbers and brutal aggression, human tactics employed precision and coordination. Captain Lisa Chen brought the Defiance in close to a Krell cruiser, so close that the enemy's long-range weapons could not track her ship. Her weapons fired at point-blank range, punching through the Krell vessel's weak-side armor. The cruiser vented atmosphere and debris as critical systems failed. One more down, Lisa reported over the fleet channel. 6 targets remaining. Captain Ryan Brooks aboard the Liberty focused his fire on the Krell fighters that were launching from their carrier ships. Taking out their small craft, he announced. I am not letting those things get anywhere near the planet. On the surface, Sareth watched the battle through the medical facility's windows. She could see bright flashes of light in the orbital space above, like lightning during a storm. Each flash represented weapons, fire, ships maneuvering, combat on a scale her peaceful people had never imagined. Your people fight like they were born to it, she said to Kyle, who continued working calmly despite the battle raging overhead. Humanity has been fighting wars for our entire history, Kyle replied, checking a patient's medication dosage. We fought each other for thousands of years before we reached the stars. We know combat in ways most species do not. He looked up at the flashes in the sky. But we also learned that fighting should have a purpose. We do not fight for conquest or glory. We fight to protect what matters. In the colony command center, Administrator Kelvin watched the tactical display in disbelief. The human ships were winning. 3 vessels against 12, and somehow the humans were winning. He had watched the first Krell ships die, then more, then more. Now only 6 Krell vessels remained, and they were trying to retreat. They are running, Kelvin whispered. The Krell are running. His communications officer looked equally shocked. The human ships are pursuing, sir. They are not letting them escape. Morrison's voice came over the open channel to the Krell fleet. Krell, Commander. You came here to prey on the defenseless. You deployed a bioweapon against innocent civilians. There will be no escape. Surrender now or be destroyed. Scaroth's response was a roar of rage and weapons fire. His ship turned for one final attack run on the Valiant, all weapons blazing. It was a suicide move, born of pride and fury. Morrison watched the Krell flagship approach. All weapons. Target that ship. Fire. At will. The Valiant's full arsenal opened up. Missiles, energy weapons, and kinetic rounds all converged on Scaroth's vessel. The Krell flagship's shields collapsed under the assault. Then its armor failed. Then its hull ruptured. The ship broke apart in a massive explosion that lit up the system. The remaining 5 Krell ships stopped fighting immediately. They transmitted surrender signals on all frequencies. "Cease fire," Morrison ordered. "Disable their weapons and engines, but do not destroy them. We will take them into custody for the Galactic Council to deal with." The battle had lasted less than 30 minutes. In that brief time, the Krell fleet had been utterly defeated. On Kesher 7, the Valarians who had watched from shelters and windows could hardly believe what they had witnessed. But the danger was not completely over. 2 Krell boarding craft had separated from the main fleet before the surrender, attempting to reach the planet's surface. They crashed through the atmosphere. Their pilots determined to salvage something from the failed raid. Chris Bailey saw them coming on his scanners. "All teams, we have incoming. 2 Krell dropships heading for the colony. Defensive positions now." The Krell ships landed in the colony's main square, their ramps dropping to release armed raiders. 40 Krell warriors emerged, huge creatures armed with brutal weapons. They expected to find frightened civilians. Instead, they found human security personnel in defensive positions. The firefight was short and brutal. The Krell relied on their natural strength and aggression, charging forward with little regard for tactics. The humans used cover, coordinated fire, and precision shooting. Within minutes, half the Krell were down. But 3 Krell warriors broke through the defensive line and charged toward the medical facility. They smashed through the entrance, roaring challenges and looking for easy victims. They found Dr. Amy Parker instead. She was standing in the main corridor with a sidearm in one hand and a surgical laser in the other. "You are not welcome in my hospital," she said calmly, then opened fire. The first Krell went down with 3 rounds in his chest. The second tried to rush her, but she sidestepped with practiced ease and shot him in the head. The third hesitated, suddenly realizing these were not helpless prey. Kyle Grant appeared from a side corridor, his own weapon raised. Other human medical personnel emerged from patient rooms, all armed. The Krell raider found himself surrounded by humans who had seamlessly transformed from healers to warriors. "Your choice," Kyle said quietly. "Surrender, or join your friends on the floor." The Krell dropped his weapon. Outside, Chris Bailey and his security teams had neutralized the rest of the raiding party. The Krell, who survived, were being secured with restraints, their weapons collected. The entire ground assault had lasted less than 10 minutes. Bailey contacted the Valiant. "Commander Morrison, surface is secure. We have prisoners for you." "Good work, Chris. Stand down to alert status yellow and begin cleanup." Morrison allowed himself to relax slightly. The battle was over. They had won. In the days that followed, the Valarians struggled to process what had happened. The humans had saved them twice, first from plague and now from invasion. The medical teams continued their work until every last patient recovered. The colony's infection rate reached 0 on the 5th day after the battle. Sareth found Kyle on the day before the human ships were scheduled to depart. He was packing medical supplies, preparing to return to the Valiant. "I wanted to thank you," she said quietly. "You saved my life, and the lives of my people." Kyle smiled. "Just doing my job. I am glad we got here in time. Can I ask you something? When those Krell came into the hospital, you were ready to kill them without hesitation. But moments before, you were gently treating patients. How do you switch between those two things so easily?" Kyle considered the question carefully. "It is not easy, and it is not really switching. Both actions come from the same place. Serath, I value life. When I treat patients, I am protecting life by healing it. When I fight enemies, I am protecting life by stopping those who would destroy it. The goal is always the same, just different methods. My people could never do what you do. We are not capable of violence, even to protect ourselves. Then it is good you have friends who are capable, Kyle replied. Not every species needs to be warriors, Serath, but every species needs someone willing to stand between them and those who would harm them. Humanity can be that for you, if you let us. On the final day, Administrator Kelvin held a ceremony in the colony's central square. Thousands of Valarians gathered to say goodbye to the humans who had saved them. Kelvin stood before Commander Morrison and his crew, trying to find words adequate to express his people's gratitude. Commander Morrison, when your ships arrived, I was afraid. Your people seemed too harsh, too militaristic, too different from everything we know. But you taught us something important. You taught us that strength and compassion are not opposites. They are partners. You came with warships, but you brought mercy. You carried weapons, but you used them only to protect the defenseless. Morrison stood at attention, his officers beside him. Administrator Kelvin, we did what any decent people would do. We saw those in need, and we helped. That is all. It is not all, Kelvin insisted. You risked your lives for strangers. You fought a battle you could have avoided. You stayed when you could have run. His voice grew stronger. The Valarian people will never forget the humans who came when we called. We are requesting that the Galactic Council assign permanent human protection to our world. We want your people here, not as conquerors but as guardians. Morrison looked surprised. Administrator, that is a significant request. Are you certain? Completely certain, Kelvin replied. We also want to learn from you. Not how to fight, that will never be our way. But how to be strong while remaining compassionate. How to protect what we love without losing who we are. Will you teach us? Morrison glanced at his crew, saw their proud expressions, and nodded. As the human ships prepared to depart, with a small garrison remaining behind to help establish defensive protocols, Serath stood with Kyle one last time. Will I see you again? She asked. Probably, Kyle replied with a grin. The Valiant will be doing regular patrols through this sector. Besides, someone needs to make sure you Valarians keep up with your medical training. You are getting pretty good at it. Serath smiled, something that would have been impossible 2 weeks ago, when she lay dying in a hospital bed. Kyle, I have one more question. When I first met you, I asked why you carry weapons if you are a healer. You said it was to protect the vulnerable. I understand that now. But here is what I do not understand. How did your people learn to be both warriors and healers at the same time? Kyle's expression grew thoughtful. Because we had to, Serath. Humanity spent thousands of years hurting each other, fighting wars, causing pain. We learned how to kill very efficiently. But we also learned that causing pain means you need to know how to heal it. Every human soldier is trained in basic medical care. Every human medic is trained in basic combat. We cannot separate the two anymore. We are what our history made us, both the good and the bad parts. And which part is stronger? Kyle smiled. That is up to us to decide. Every single day. Today, we chose to heal. Yesterday, we chose to protect. Tomorrow, we will make that choice again. That is what being human means. The Valiant lifted off from Kesher 7, followed by the Defiance and Liberty. The 3 warships that had arrived expecting to provide medical aid and ended up fighting a war climbed into orbit and prepared for the jump to faster-than-light travel. On the surface, Valarians watched them go, no longer afraid of the humans, but grateful for them. They had learned that sometimes, the best medical aid comes with weapons loaded and shields raised, ready to ensure the doctors can work in peace. And across the galaxy, the story spread. The story of how the Valarians asked for healers and got human warships instead. How those warships saved them twice over. How humanity proved that strength without compassion is brutality, but compassion without strength is helplessness. The humans had shown the galaxy a different way. They were healers, who could fight, and warriors, who could heal. They protected those who could not protect themselves, not for glory or reward, but because it was the right thing to do. As Commander Morrison sat in his command chair, watching the stars streak past as they jumped to faster than light speed, he allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. They had come to render aid and ended up changing a world. Not bad for a week's work. Dr. Amy Parker appeared beside him. Commander, the final medical reports show 0 remaining cases of the plague. HFY 7 is completely clean. Good work, Doctor. Get some rest. You have earned it. Amy smiled tiredly. So have you, sir. So have we all. And somewhere in the darkness of space, the 3 human warships continued their patrol, ready to answer the next distress call, ready to bring help in whatever form was needed. Because that was what humans did. They came when called. They helped those in need. And they protected the vulnerable, sometimes with medicine, sometimes with weapons, often with both, always with the same purpose: to defend life, no matter the cost.